Irregularities abound in the 2020 presidential election, which we still don't have an answer to. Irregularities, by the way, is a very soft word for fraud. That's the polite word that we all use. But we're looking at a lot of problems in the election, be it in Pennsylvania, in Georgia, in Michigan. Lots of questions, not a lot of answers. It's working its way through the court system. We are joined now by a man who predicted that this would happen, who called that there would be these issues of fraud throughout the election, more so even than usual. That would be the great Dinesh D'Souza, author of approximately 7 zillion books, filmmaker extraordinaire, and most recently, the filmmaker behind Trump Card. We spoke to Dinesh a few weeks ago when the movie came out. I hope you've seen it since then. But if not, we will give you another opportunity and we will discuss what's going to happen in this election. Dinesh, thanks so much for coming on.
My pleasure.
Dinesh, I agreed with you and with your take that this election was going to have a lot of problems with it. I figured this would go on for a long time. It would work its way through the courts. But there's something very frustrating because conservatives are very good at predicting the fraud, but we're not great at identifying it in the moment, proving it, overturning it, flipping it around. What do you think the Trump team and conservatives generally have to do right now to try to salvage this election?
Well, I think the most important thing is to produce in a kind of comprehensive way the evidence of systematic fraud, not just episodic fraud, a case here, a case there, but rather as fraud that is built into the way the election was organized. You show this through a combination of statistical techniques, if you can produce machines that have the capacity to trade votes, if you have whistleblowers that can come forward, this is the kind of bombshell evidence needed. So it has to be presented in a public manner and also in a legal manner. And it has to be done simultaneously. So this is really what we're waiting for, and the clock is ticking on it. But I have confidence in Sidney Powell and the team to be able to make this case. We're just all eagerly waiting to see it.
And for those who don't know, who is Sidney Powell? Sidney Powell came to popularity as Mike Flynn's attorney and has sort of exposed a lot of corruption. But what is Sidney's role in all of this?
Well, Sidney Powell picked up the Michael Flynn case and was able to peel off some layers of the onion that showed that both Hillary Clinton and Obama were the ringleaders of this operation. In other words, just as we thought, it's implausible that Comey and Clapper and Strzok and Page and Brennan, all these guys, they didn't go off on independent surveillance expeditions. Somebody gave the order. And somebody looks to have been Barack Obama. So this is a very powerful set of facts that has come out. And the judge, of course, in the Flynn case has been doing his best to sort of throw water on the fire and try to put it out, or at least postpone it, kick the can down the road. So Sidney Powell has become kind of a legend in the legal community and is not known for making reckless, irresponsible statements. I think for this reason, there's a great deal of anxiety, but also anticipation in what she's about to unfurl.
Well, this is the issue, because what you're hearing from Democrats and what you're hearing from some of these weak-kneed conservatives, the ones who congratulated Joe Biden before the election was over and, really want President Trump to concede. What you're hearing is these are reckless, irresponsible allegations. We have no real evidence of fraud. You got to put up or shut up. Come on, no big deal here. And it strikes me that the issue with voter fraud, especially when you've got widespread unsolicited mail-in ballots, is it's extraordinarily difficult to identify. The isolated cases, as you say, don't necessarily show systemic fraud. So what do we say to these people who tell us, sorry, you don't have enough evidence?
Well, the first thing is that Republicans have this kind of default position of going namby-pamby when the going gets tough. And it's important to realize that this is what feeds the aggression of the left. The confidence of the left in doing these shenanigans is based upon the idea that they can count on us to do nothing about it. And I think this happens across the board. Their view is, look, we can knock down your monuments because you won't knock down our monuments. We can unleash the deep state against you because we know that you'll never unleash the deep state against us.
Right.
We can pack the court because we know that even if you had all the power, you'd never pack the court. And we can rig elections, knowing that not only would you not dream of doing it, but you're likely to go along with it and certify the results of a rigged election. So they count on us to be suckers. And sure enough, one or two of us are. But I think on the balance, the Republican base is not giving in on this. And this is what is unnerving the left. For the first time, Trump has sort of installed a little backbone in our side, and we're holding firm as we should.
I'm so pleased to see it. I remember in 2016 when President Trump was nominated, or when he was about to be nominated, you had all of these Republicans say, oh no, he isn't really conservative. And then you look at his record and you realize he's much more conservative in practice than any of those people ever were. But what really seems to irk them is this backbone, is this courage. I mean, we're being told right now that and we're being told this by basically the entire establishment media, including outlets that we thought were on our side, maybe they're not so much on our side. We're being told that if President Trump does not concede this election before the legal process plays out, that we're somehow overthrowing democratic norms. It's a threat to democracy. What do we say to that?
Well, let's look at the Orwellian society that the left has not only been trying to impose, but they've gotten pretty far down the road. The signature elements of Orwellianism, if you want to call that, or Orwell country, are number one, the rewriting of history, check. Number two, newspeak, the uniformity of the media. I mean, think about what it means when we say that the media in general did not cover the biggest story of the election. Think of how hard it is to pull that off. There are thousands of reporters. There are hundreds of media organizations. Was there not one enterprising guy at the Dallas Morning News or the Sacramento Bee who goes, listen, my idiot colleagues don't want to cover the biggest story of the election? Thank you. I will step forward. But even that guy was scared to do it. Even he knew that he wouldn't work in journalism anymore. So the degree of uniform, and then finally the social intimidation, Antifa, digital censorship. So these guys who have been not only violating the spirit of democracy, but the guardrails of our society, they're running roughshod over the Bill of Rights. They want to lecture us about the democratic process. I don't think we should pay any attention to these clowns.
I think you're totally right. It reminds me of when the left scolds conservatives on racial issues, on racism. And I think, how dare you? The left has the worst record on race in this country that I can imagine. In particular, and you've worked on this quite a bit, the Democratic Party has absolutely the worst record on race in this country. How dare you lecture me? I don't care what you have to say about that. And of course, it's the same thing when it comes to democratic norms, when it comes to the Constitution. But one worry I have, even beyond all the policy, great policy we'll lose, the great leadership we'll lose if President Trump does not manage to eke out this election, is we won't be able to uncover the corruption. You know, in many ways, Trump wasn't supposed to win in 2016. The reason we've figured out all the shenanigans that happened during the Obama administration is in part because Trump did win. Do you think there is any hope if, worst case scenario, Biden is named president? Is there any way for conservatives to go in there and expose what they've done, or will that be just lost to history?
Well, the investigative resources on our side are quite limited, and this is our own fault. The truth of the matter is, if I were running Fox News, I would have hired 100 investigative reporters to dig behind, lift all the stones and look underneath. I wouldn't have set up something that could be just called talk radio on TV, because that's ultimately nothing more than punditry. It seems to me, it occurs to me, this is my opinion. That's important, but it's not as important as facts, because facts are what really change minds. What I worry about is, let's say we have irrefutable evidence of systematic fraud and nothing happens. Let's say the courts go, it's not our jurisdiction, or it's too late, it's over, or get used to it. This will actually put us in a very awkward position, because we will feel then we will be a captive population inside of a democracy. I mean, a democracy is based on the idea that even if you lose, you should lose gracefully, because you have a chance to win the next time. But what if you don't? What if you don't have a chance to win the next time? Then you begin to feel like this is not a democracy. And in fact, it's not even really a country, because ultimately one part of the population is ruling by force over the other. I think the serious implications of that we'll have to consider very carefully if it comes to that.
And the courts are going to play a central role here. I was just thinking back when the same people who told us that the 2016 election was stolen tell us that now elections can't be stolen, no one would stuff a ballot box, it couldn't happen. I thought back to the 1948 Senate race in Texas where Lyndon Johnson cheated. He stole the election from Coke Stevenson. This was a million ballot race. Johnson won by 87 votes. They stuffed the ballot box, specifically box 13 from a very crooked county. They did discover this. I mean, it went up to the Supreme Court, and Robert Caro did a good job of uncovering what really happened decades and decades later. Johnson had already left the White House. But it went up to the Supreme Court. It was so obvious Johnson had stolen the election. And the Supreme Court said, sorry, it's not our jurisdiction. We don't want to deal with it. It's a state matter. They sent it back. Obviously, Johnson takes the Senate seat, becomes vice president, becomes president. Doesn't matter that he stole it. Do you have faith? Do you have trust in the courts that they're going to act responsibly here, however the evidence comes out? Do you think they would have that backbone if there were evidence of systemic fraud, or are the courts just going to go weak?
The courts can go either way, and I think in this case, procedure doesn't really do the trick, because the court could say, well, listen, this is up to the state legislatures to fix. But here's the problem. What if you're talking about swing states and you're talking about Democratic legislatures in some of those states that are organizing the rigging? Is the court going to say, you know what, it's a state function. If the states want to rig their elections, they totally can. If they want to assign 3 votes to one guy and 1 vote to another guy, that's totally up to them. I don't think that's right. I think that the courts have got to realize that this is a serious crisis of our democracy that affects the whole country. Every illegal vote cast cancels out a legitimate vote cast.
Right.
So what they're doing is they're disenfranchising us, our legal votes, by introducing illegal votes. So I think this is not something that can be punted down the road. I don't think it can be ignored. I don't think the Supreme Court is going to be careless enough and naive. I mean, this would be like the Dred Scott decision for them if they were to ultimately wash their hands off the biggest issue right now, essentially affecting American democracy.
How do you think the right is doing? I'm not just talking about the legal representatives of the campaigns. I'm talking about the people who are making the case in the public. How do you think we're doing? Because you've hit on something right here that I think is really important. The left always talks about voter suppression, and every vote is very important, and we have to enfranchise people. And what you're saying is right, but every single time you have an illegal vote, you've just disenfranchised a legal, eligible voter. Are we making that argument properly, or are we falling a little short of persuasion?
We're suffering not from a lack of persuasion, but from a lack of gigantic megaphones to be able to get this message to 300 million Americans.
Yeah.
As you know, even Fox News has a reach of 5 million. Rush Limbaugh has a big reach. Talk radio has a big reach. But the left is able to penetrate into essentially every American home. So they dominate the narrative, not because they're more persuasive, but because they have a wider reach. So we're feeling, I think, very keenly the absence of having those big megaphones. And I think we've got to realize we need to build them. But the simple reason that this doesn't just affect this election, but it affects every election.
Well, right, because sometimes the left attacks us at the Daily Wire, because the Daily Wire, as a single outlet, performs very well on Facebook, which is just one social media platform. One outlet, one social media platform, and they say, oh, Facebook's all in the tank for conservatives. You say, well, look at all the other platforms. I got to fill in for Rush on Friday. It was such a thrill. I thought, oh my gosh, what a huge audience. But even Rush's audience is, whatever it is, 25 million or something, could even be a little bit higher. And you think, oh my gosh, that's unbelievable. What an achievement. And then compare that to NBC, CBS, ABC, the Washington Post, the New York Times, every other media, basically every other media outlet are left-wing. And so it doesn't matter. You get the once-in-a-lifetime Rush Limbaugh. You get, a conservative outlet that does well on one platform for a while. That gets drowned out in the broader public by this established empire of the leftist media.
Yeah, I mean, let's not even count ABC, NBC, and CBS. Just take, NPR, National Public Radio, which is subsidized by the government and has become a fully occupied instrument of the left. And while Rush is on for 3 hours a day, NPR is on all day. Yeah. And so what you have is that the left controls the debate. In a sense, you could almost say that this is their secret weapon, the media. And the media has become brazenly dishonest. I mean, remember in the old days that there was bias, but there was at least some obligation to impartiality, to fairness. You could shame the media by calling them to a higher standard. Look at the way you've covered Reagan versus, say, Carter or Reagan versus Mondale. And they'd go, yeah, but now there's no point even making these kinds of arguments because they don't have those higher standards of objectivity. They're not even pretending to be unbiased. And the of this is, I think, become very transparent.
Do you think that the future of the media will be a return to, say, post-World War II kind of liberal, at least it's liberal, but they make a pretense of having these objective standards? Or do you think it's going to go back to, say, the 18th or 19th century model where you just have partisan press and you got the Tennessee Democrat, and then you've got the other paper and they have their candidates and they own their biases? Is that going to be the future, or are they going to keep up this pretense that they're somehow objective?
No, I think that depends on us. If we're able to create alternative media that have the same kind of reach, then we will have to stop listening to them. Because I think we have to realize we're not dealing with real reporters. I mean, you're dealing with people who have press badges, but they're essentially operatives for the left.
Yeah.
I mean, think of a reporter who goes to an Antifa rally and the Antifa guys are pulling some old guy out of a car and beating him up. And the Antifa guy turns to the reporters and goes, "Turn away your camera. Don't cover this. Keep your camera focused only on the cops." So when the cops come rushing in, it now appears like, oh, the cops are being so heavy-handed, but you're not noting the Antifa bullying and the Antifa thuggery that is leading to this response. So, and the media cooperates with this. So the media is part of Antifa. They are the public relations arm of Antifa. I think once we see this, we've got to realize these people aren't reporters. The fact that we take them seriously, we were like, oh, Wolf Blitzer said on CNN, this is part of the problem. They are living in our minds, and we've got to reduce the power of the media in our heads.
A great point, because we are the ones talking about them. We are the ones who care what they say. And in a way, we sort of have to, because they have influence. But the more we talk about them, the more influence they have. It's such a good point. I noticed one thing. This scandalized even me. And I have a pretty low respect for big tech and the media, very low expectations. President Trump tweeted out, "I won the election," which he's been saying since the beginning. Joe Biden says he won the election. Trump says he won the election. And it said on the bottom, not just that the claim was disputed, it said, official sources have called this election differently. And I said, well, hold on a second. First of all, President Trump, he is an official. I think the President of the United States is an official. But then I thought, okay, the states have not certified the results. The electors have not voted. Those are the officials who decide elections. So what referral or what officials are they referring to? They were referring to the media and big tech and Jack Dorsey, basically, as the officials who rule us. How did we get to that situation?
Isn't that interesting? They're not talking about the Supreme Court. That would be an official source. They're not talking about the Congress. That would be an official source. They're not talking about the electors or the Electoral College. That would be an official source. So it really shows you how we've come unhinged from reality. I mean, I posted on Facebook a couple of weeks ago. I quoted Biden saying that Antifa is merely an idea. Direct quote from Biden, just innocuous. And Facebook immediately goes, Dinesh, we're restricting you, we're demonetizing you. We are putting a warning on this that says lacking context. So let's think about this, lacking context. What context? I mean, did Biden issue a lengthy study on Antifa, of which I plucked out this? No, there was no context. And what makes this maddening is, like with any other company, let's say, for example, United Airlines cancels my reservation. I can call United and go, listen, you morons, cancel my reservation. I paid for my ticket. You can talk to them and make them see reason. Here, there's no one to call.
You're right.
You just got a bunch of weirdos and man buns sitting around Jack Dorsey's, office. They go, let's ban this guy, So you're dealing with essentially an absolute clown show. I think even George Orwell would realize that not only is this tragic, there's also an element of sort of comedy to it.
Yes, there is. You can laugh or cry, I suppose. There is a kind of dark humor in all of it. We will find out. I mean, the official sources, I suppose, will decide this election at the court level, at the state legislature level, at the elector level. We can't say we didn't see this coming. Those of us who saw Trump Card, which I recommend people go see, those of us who were listening to you before the election could have seen this coming, but maybe they weren't able to listen to you. Maybe they weren't even able to see Trump Card because of of the kind of censorship that we're seeing from our artificial official sources. So in the meantime, definitely encourage people to go check out Trump Card, and obviously follow Dinesh while you're still allowed to before the man buns kick you off of his page. And Dinesh, thank you so much as always for being here.
My pleasure.